It's Wild Ones Pro Show time. I am Jimmy. Producer Emily is here.
Hello.
As is Katie.
Hello.
Hi, Katie. Nice to have you in the studio, finally. How was your trip?
It was quite something, yeah. It was really memorable. And my first time at the Tour de France, really memorable, but also complete chaos.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, speaking of chaos, it was also chaos at the end of stage 3, which is what we're here to talk about today. A day for the sprinters and quite a dramatic one. We saw 3 massive crashes, one of which has resulted in green jersey favourite Jasper Philipsen having to abandon the tour.
Oh, that is so sad, isn't it?
It is.
Because, at the end of the day, we want good competition, and him being in the competition is what we all want to see. So, yeah, it's very sad he's had to abandon.
It is, yeah, a crap way to go out. He looked incredibly hurt. We're going to get into it properly and also into what happened at the end of the stage. First of all, thank you very much to Garmin for supporting the show.
And also Van Rysel, of course.
Also Van Rysel. So let's get into it, shall we?
Yeah, sure. It was the flattest road stage of the Tour with just 800 metres of altitude on the menu. The riders travelled from Valenciennes to Dunkirk. And basically for the first 120 kilometres, nothing happened. It was a lovely cafe ride for everyone. And then it all kicked off.
It absolutely did. And this is where the biggest news of the day comes in. Philipsen had a massive high-speed crash on the intermediate sprint. So he went down hard at about 60 kilometres per hour after a chain reaction, basically, from the riders in front of him. He flipped over his handlebars, landed incredibly hard on his right shoulder. The bike went under him, and I feel like we saw sparks flying from his bike.
There was definitely sparks. So based on the fact his bike is basically all carbon, It almost certainly is the bike computer and or the out front mount, which is probably the only bit that's metal. But the nasty bit is he was sliding on his back for a long distance, and you could see his jersey was all ripped. As Benny said, it looked like a tank top, and there was just, there's going to be the road rash. Unpleasant, very unpleasant.
Yeah, the aftermath obviously was that, the intermediate sprint kind of became moot in a way. The bunch kind of sat up and just rolled over the line. They looked pretty shell-shocked, to be honest. I think there was an air of seriousness about it, and we saw Philipsen grimacing. He was taken immediately off to the side of the road for treatment. And his teammates were all crowding around him, looking very concerned, understandably.
They were. I also saw one of them having to bend his handlebars on his bike back into place. They stayed around him in the hopes that he would get up, but unfortunately just...
Interestingly, on the subject of bending the handlebars back around, I actually heard one of the commentators mention this, and it makes you... And then you start thinking about it. We've seen so many crashes happen already in this race where the bikes are all having to get their handlebars put around. So I guess it's something to do with one-piece integrated bar and stems now. Is that, I don't know, I guess the design of them or the way they fix to the bike is just not as hardy, I guess, as a traditional bar and stem.
I feel like that's a one-person conversation, Jimmy, because Katie and myself are not necessarily that techie, but...
Purely an observation.
Yeah, fair. Katie, you mentioned that all of the sprinters sat up, all but one, Jonathan Milan, who took those sprint points. I don't think it was kind of trying to make the best of a bad situation. I genuinely don't think he clocked it until he went over the line.
No, he was clearly too far ahead of what had happened to actually see, and was at such a speed at that point that he was obviously going to roll over the line first. That was just sort of how it unfolded, really.
Yeah, totally. So I think the question is, how did this happen? So ultimately, the race went from 0 to 60 as soon as that intermediate sprint started. The sprinters all hit the burners. They were jostling for a good position. And on the face of it, it looked like Brian Coquard of Cofidis lost control of his bike and kind of ricocheted into Philipsen.
Alpecin's Jonas Ricard had a go at Coquard shortly afterwards.
So clearly they thought he was at fault as well.
Yeah, but we watched the clip 500 bazillion times and we actually think that it happened further up the chain.
Yes, so Intermarché Wanties, Hugo Page was at the front of the bunch and kind of drifted ever so slightly to the centre of the road in front of Jonathan Milan's lead-out man, Simone Consone.
That's a cool name, that, isn't it?
Simone Consone. So Consone looked like he stopped pedalling very briefly. Milan being behind him then sort of had to swing around.
He launched his attack, didn't he?
Yeah, and it sort of felt like he had no choice. That was the time to go because Consone just backed off. All of this is happening within milliseconds, by the way.
Yeah, and as Milan was coming around, he kind of squeezed Brian Coquard of Cofidis into Bini and Gamai's lead-out man, Lawrence Rex, who was to the right of him. And Rex held firm, like he held his line. He kind of defended his place on the road, really. And it squeezed Coquard in the middle between them.
Yeah, so there at that point, Coquard lost his balance, ricocheted, unclipped and wiped out Jasper.
He was literally pedalless at a point. He was hands on his bars, bum on his seat, legs dangling down.
Yeah, so we've broken it down there. The point of that is not to place any blame. Is there any blame to place anywhere? I'm not sure. I would hope that the UCI says no on that.
It's what they call a racing incident in, the racing parlance, if you like. I think, anyway. It seems just one of those situations where they're just all going too fast. They're all bunched too close together and there's a ripple effect. And I think, as you say, I don't think that any blame should really be attributed here. It doesn't seem fair to place that burden on anyone in particular.
It's very easy, and I think there will probably be some posts and social media and stuff out there in the world probably already which is blaming particular people for this event. But, at the speeds they're going, in the split-second nature of it, as you said, Emily, and if you actually watch the entire moment, it's just racing. As disappointing as it is for Philipsen and De Koning, and for us as people watching the event, it is just a racing incident, it seems.
Yeah, so currently we don't have an injury update on Philipsen at the time we record. I'm sure we will hear that overnight in the coming hours. I would not be surprised if it was some sort of thing to do with the collarbone just because he came down so hard on that shoulder. But just really sad news. It's just a rubbish way to start the episode, a rubbish way for the stage to have played out.
Can I just say something that I am quite happy to see? And obviously Philipsen was in a lot of discomfort, but I feel like 20 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, maybe even less, they would have just pushed him on a bike and he would have rolled on for a bit more to see if essentially they would have assessed his injuries on a bike whilst moving. So it's actually quite nice to see a scenario where they've gone, you're hurt, mate. And probably because the concussion rule as well, they probably all knew he's instantly out.
Yeah.
Because the officials would have said, you're not racing.
Yeah.
There is no chance you can continue racing. And it very quickly went into a, Philip, he's out of the race, start your recovery process. And I think that is a positive for the sport, at least.
So that wasn't it, unfortunately. We moved into the final of the race inside 5 kilometres. So we had the 5 kilometre rule in place today, which meant that the GC riders' times were all safe. And that's the point at which the sprint teams would take over and start to build on their lead outs and so on. However, we saw a big crash with 3.2 kilometres to go. We think it involved Anthony Turgis of Total Energies, Dylan Groenewegen of Jayco Alula, and we definitely know it involved Jordi Meus of Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe and his teammate Lawrence Pithy. Meus was very badly injured in that crash, unfortunately.
Am I right in saying that Remco was involved as well?
Yeah, well, we didn't see it on camera, so it was really difficult to know what happened there. There was no footage of it. However, despite being really near the front, all the way up to that 5 kilometre rule, Remco was really well positioned with his team. He drifted back at some point and was behind that crash when it happened. And we saw him afterwards on the camera, holding his side, looking pretty unhappy. So yes, we think he came down in that crash, and it's not good news for Remco, but let's just hope that it's nothing more than a few bruises.
There was then another crash on the final corner.
Yeah. It was awful. Danny Van Poppel was the first rider involved in this case. He's a Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe rider. He moved off his line, wiped out Davide Ballerini of XDS Astana, and it was like a domino effect after that with Paul Penwet of Groupama FDJ, followed by Brian Coquard. Again, it's a bad day for him. He went down hard on his shoulder. Arnaud Delis of Losso followed. And we think a Total Energies rider as well was the last one, and the domino effects who may be going through the barriers there. We're not even sure who that was yet.
Hello, we come to you with some late breaking news that we're just going to add in. There have been some yellow cards handed out for some of the crashes that we saw today. So first of all, the Philipsen crash. Yellow card, a fine, and 13 points deducted for Brian Coquard of Cofidis. The other person to be fined in this situation is Little Trek's Edward Thunes, rider number 88.
Who was not present in that sprint.
No, we're pretty certain of this. We have looked back over that footage a lot. We cannot see a rider number 88.
So Milan's his race number is 81, and then Simone Cincioni is 82, and 88 was not present.
Yeah.
And I've even looked back at like as much of footage as is available. There is one more Trek rider in there. You can't see what his name his number is, but he's like way back. Like,
so unless
we're
missing something, I'm not sure about that. Brian Coquard fined there.
I think it feels like, based on the other yellows they've handed out as well, or at least one of the other yellows, it looks like they're penalising people for falling off their bike.
So in the final crash of the day, we've also seen yellow cards given out to Danny Van Poppel and Ballerini. Van Poppel, as we explained, was the one who deviated his line, we think, and kind of then caused that domino effect that saw Ballerini go over and then take down the rest of the riders. So potentially two cases here where there's a ricochet effect, and the person who was then at the end of that and started was a bit of a catalyst, I don't know, maybe in the middle, has been penalised here.
Yeah, it just seems like odd decision making, to be honest, but I guess quite often we're used to seeing this.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we aren't the experts.
And neither are they.
Other news, unfortunately, we were correct. Broken collarbone confirmed for Philipsen, perhaps some fractured ribs as well.
Yeah, it seems that way.
And he's going to need surgery. Right, back to the show. So then, of the sprinters that were left, we were ultimately left with a 2-up sprint for the line between Soudal's Tim Malia and Jonathan Milan of Trek. And it was a sprint finish, and ultimately Tim Malia took that win. A little bit overshadowed, some might say.
Yeah, day of mixed fortunes for Soudal Quickstep for sure, with Remco possibly being injured. But yeah, joy for Malia, his second Tour stage win by a tyre width over Milan. It was really close in the end there.
Yeah.
But those two were well clear of the next rider, Phil Bauhaus in third.
I kind of feel like Milan is going to, like, he's so hungry for wins, isn't he? And I feel like he's one of those people that when he isn't winning, everyone knows about it. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out over the next few stages, or the next 19 days or whatever it is.
It's interesting that you say that, because there was a bit of, well, probably internal politics, I suppose, but Mads Pedersen went to the Tour last year and did incredibly well. He went to the Giro instead this year and did incredibly well. He won some stages. He won the Ciclamino jersey, the points jersey. And this year, Milan was favoured for the Tour de France. So I feel like the internal rivalry, whilst that team has a brilliant kind of internal atmosphere and they're all very good friends, I think those two sprinters have a very strong competitive edge going on there. So yeah, you're right. I think Milan really, really wants this for sure.
That is an interesting point, because I don't know why, but it feels like, especially this year, more than ones I've seen recently, that there's a lot of pressure on all of the teams to perform. And I know, that has always been their job, but it just seems like more. I can't totally understand why. And I feel like that is why we've seen so many accidents today. There seems to be lots of scrappy, ugly bike riding. It's like British crit racing today. There's like these tiny non-existent gaps and someone's just thrown themselves into it, not caring about the consequences behind them. It is a proper British fourth cat crit.
It's interesting. There's been so much talk over the last 3 days, especially in the commentary, of like tension in the peloton, and it has been 3 notable days. Is it down to tension? I don't know.
I think it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, I think, where you're told by your DSs, you've got that radio in your ear and people saying, it's going to be really tense, boys. You've got to be at the front. You've got to be in position.
Yeah.
Make sure you're in front for this corner. Make sure you're alert for this, roundabout. And I think it's got this infectious kind of energy, negative energy, actually, that I think, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like I said, the tension creates more tension, and yeah, as you say, there's loads of pressure. Whether it comes from like going for UCI points, which everyone is this year, it's really tense in that race for retaining the World Tour licenses, and it's the Tour de France. Those teams want those wins for their sponsors. It's a huge deal, and it's tough out there.
So they were the big talking points of the day. One other notable moment was UAE's Tim Wellens was on a one-man mission today for a single King of the Mountains point. What was that about?
Yeah, it seems a bit strange on the surface of it to be going so hard for 1 point. But yeah, he left the bunch as the single categorised climb of the day approached, which was, interestingly, Mont Cassel, the climb that we saw Benjamin Thomas and Matteo Vescher crash on in stage 1. They're using it again today, and it offered the only point. Why was Tim Wellens so bothered? Well, Tadej Pogačar, his leader at UAE, is currently wearing the polka dot jersey. Tim Wellens was in second. If he gained that point, he would take over the lead in the polka dot jersey competition, keeping the jersey within the team. It's a nice thing to have. The sponsors like that sort of thing. However, it takes the pressure off his leader. Tadej then doesn't have to go do a podium ceremony, do the interviews. He gets to go back to the bus and begin his recovery earlier. So Wellens took one for the team, quite literally.
Nice. So he's in the polka dot jersey. What about the other jerseys?
Yeah, so we've got 2 remaining the same. Yellow stays with Mathieu van der Poel, and the white jersey of the young rider stays with Kevin Vauquelin of Arkea B&B Hotels. But obviously there is a change in the green jersey competition with Philipsen crashing out. It goes to Jonathan Milan. So he gets a consolation, I guess.
Nice. Okay, so that's the roundup of the stage. Now I'm going to bring you on to some other news. We saw yesterday Jonathan Milan and Biniam Girmay having a bit of a tiff over the intermediate sprint yesterday. They've since made up, you'll be happy to know. They had a little shake of hands after the race yesterday. Clearly there's no bad blood. In fact, Intermarché Wanty actually posted something really funny on their socials. They posted a screenshot of the moment that they were fighting and captioned it, "Milan isn't happy that Bini eats pizza with pineapple."
And did you know, I don't know if you realised, but Little Trek followed it up with, no, it's because he puts ketchup on his pizza, on his spaghetti, sorry. Either would be bad. So the teams, they made up on behalf of the 2 riders first, I think.
So now on to our fluff up of the day. Wout van Aert almost got taken out by a gate. So basically what happened is he was coming off the team bus. He sort of walked into a fenced off area that was being manned by a security guard, and as he passed through the gate, the guard accidentally started to close it on him. Sources say it was a hit put out by UAE.
Definitely, that is the only certain thing about today's episode is that UAE put a hit out on Van Aert.
No, that for clarity, that is just a joke. Last bit of today. This is a feature we're bringing back that we had on last year called Mystic Bella. Woo! If you watched last year, you will know our dog Bella is a psychic, very much like Paul the Octopus that used to do the predictions for the World Cup.
So on that basis, who did she pick last year?
She may or may not have picked Roglic.
And how did that work out?
He may or may not have crashed out in the very early stages of the race.
So basically what we're saying is whatever Bella picks, do the opposite.
No. Honestly, they're interesting predictions. So GC winner I put out 3 pictures on the ground for her. Tadej Pogačar, Jonas Vingegaard, and then just another one of someone else.
Okay. Makes
because
sense.
I did this today, and at this point, Roglic and Remco were 40 seconds down. But listen, anything can happen. So
What did she pick?
I put a treat on top of each, and she went to Pogačar.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
I mean, the gal's got a good chance this year, I would say. Next one, green jersey. Put out a lot of options here. She picked Tim Malia, today's stage winner. And she picked it before the stage end. She left the treat that was on Van der Poel. She hoovered up all of them but left Van der Poel. I don't know what that means.
What?
Yeah, if you want to read into something.
I think she's confirming Mathieu van der Poel's statement that he isn't going for green this year.
Yeah, but now with Jasper Philipsen out. Yeah, who knows? Okay.
Well, you say that. We did see him leading out no one in the final sprint.
Okay, last one. King of the Mountains jersey. Again, I put out Tadej Pogačar, Jonas Vingegaard, or someone else, because sometimes it goes to the people who are in the GC lead. Sometimes, like last year, it's a bit of a wild card. It was Carapaz last year. So she picked someone else.
I don't think you can call Carapaz a wild card.
No. But ultimately, it's not the podium of the GC. Is the point I'm making?
Yeah.
She picked someone else. The treat was specifically on a picture of Felix Gall, Decathlon AG2R. So I don't know. Also, she ignored the treat on Vingegaard.
Why is she not eating all of her food?
I don't know. And if someone wants to say it's because it was brown, boring kibble, she has IBS, okay? And I have to be very strict on what I feed her. So that was the thing we had in the studio that she's allowed to eat. So there you go. Mystic Bella's predictions. We will see if they come true. Hopefully she is not a jinx to anyone like last year. Please. The Wild Ones Pro Show is supported by Garmin.
And we are in some really good company because Garmin also supports some of the very best riders in the Tour de France and the Tour de France Femme.
Yeah, they work with teams like Visma Bikes, Soudal Quickstep, SD Works Pro Time, FDJ Suez, and many more.
And because Garmin provides these teams with trainers, head units and wearables, they've got access to mountains of incredible data.
And they're going to share some of that data with us throughout the coming stages. So we'll get a really interesting insight into the physical demands of the most prestigious bike races in the world.
So please stay tuned for that. And once again, thanks to Garmin for supporting the show.
How would you like to win a Van Rysel RCR-F 105 Di2 worth £5,000?
I would love to. I've ridden that bike. It is proper good.
Well, sorry, Jimmy, you can't. But one of our UK listeners will, thanks to our sponsor, Van Rysel.
That's class. The RCR-F is literally a Tour de France race bike.
Yeah, the official bikes of Decathlon AG2R Le Mondial.
The 105 version has the same grade of carbon that the pros ride.
So to enter the draw to win this bike, click the link in our description. You must be a UK resident aged 18 or over and T's and C's apply. One winner will be chosen by Van Rysel and contacted by them a week after the draw closes at midnight on August 4th. I sound like one of those radio adverts, don't I?
No, it wasn't fast enough. So good luck and thanks to Van Rysel for supporting the Wild Ones Pro Show. Okay, should we do a preview of Stage 4?
Let's do it.
So, beginning in Amiens in the Somme region and heading west to Rouen in Normandy, Stage 4 is 174 kilometres long with 2,000 metres of elevation and a profile backloaded with punchy climbs. The route is rolling throughout the day. There's an intermediate sprint with 31 kilometres to go and a total of 5 categorised climbs crowded into the final 60 kilometres of the route, which should ignite the action.
Wowee.
With a rollercoaster of ups and downs and pitches of over 10% on the penultimate climb, the stage concludes with an 800-metre kicker up to the finish line, inviting the punchers to come out and try their luck.
What? Like, have you looked at the profile? It is like...
It's basically all the action in the last 60k. You say punches, I think Van der Poel. Could it be a day for him?
I think so. He's obviously feeling really good. He's proven he's got the form and it's just a stage made for him. Who else could contest? Obviously, we might see Tadej Pogačar going for it. Or maybe Jonas Vingegaard will kick off the action again. Who knows?
Perhaps. I also just wanted to highlight the T-shirt that I am wearing. On Wednesdays, we wear Wout. No, it's Monday. On Mondays, we wear Wout. I know he said he's there for Jonas and not anything else, but, I just wanted to mention him.
He's definitely there for Jonas.
He is, yeah.
It feels like it's potentially Stage 2 all over. Is there a chance that the GC boys go, nah, let's save ourselves for later? Can Pogačar hold off?
Do you think there's an argument that because of this tension and because of nasty crashes and stuff, they might actually want to sit back and relax more? I understand it's the Tour, but just kind of, we haven't really had
It's either that or the opposite, which we are seeing more and more of, which is they all want to be at the front to stay safe. So, yeah, I just don't see that happening. And if they're at the front, one of them twitches, they all twitch.
Yeah.
Outside chances, I mean, I say outside, it's not that outside. We saw Kevin Voekelin riding really strongly yesterday on stage 2. It's his home region in Normandy. He's wearing the white jersey and he feels, I think, like he could have done better. There was some talk with Matteo Jorgensen about team tactics, and I think that maybe he will, well, no, definitely he'll want to be going for it. So keep an eye on him. Thibaut Nace might also want to have a good go after crashing on stage 1. So if he's fully recovered, Thibaut Nace for Little Trek is a really good shout.
I suppose we could even potentially see a break, go and stick on this. Because if the GC boys decide not to race, then there is a big opportunity for a break to actually go and stick, because it's hard enough they'll be able to hold it. So apart from the crashes today, it has been a very well designed course thus far, and I think we're on for a really good stage tomorrow as well.
Although actually, just thinking back when you talk about very well designed course, Tim Wellens' polka dot jersey point was on that same cobbled climb where we saw the crash.
Yeah, I think because they're in this specific department, the Nord Pas de Calais, which is quite a small region, and they have to stage 3 full stages within that region. So I think they're just using the best bits of it. And that climb is really a good climb. So I guess that's why they used it twice. So good, they used it twice.
I mean, I saw someone in our comments saying, yes, the UCI will ban 38mm handlebars, but they will allow a climb like that to feature not once but twice now. So I mean, what do I know?
It wasn't the climb that caused the crash.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so we will find out what happens at the end of that stage, and we will be back with that news tomorrow. So please join us then. Thank you very much, Katie.
Thank you.
And thank you to Jimmy.
See you all tomorrow.
Yes, thank you. Bye.
Bye.